just recently taken our association through a strategic planning process. So it's kind of fresh and new on my mind. And I've been in this role as executive director for about 2 years now.
Thank you. And I can introduce myself quickly too. I'm Gretchen Jordan. I'm the Live Association Manager, and I have been involved with local volunteer management groups. I started with NOVA in Portland, Oregon, 1996, so almost 20 years I've been involved. I worked on the membership committee, membership chair, president, and then I've also been involved with several other volunteer manager associations in Oregon and in other locations, as well as being involved with Alive for the past 10 years. And we'll go ahead and go on to other introductions. So I would love for those people who are present on the call to go ahead and introduce yourself, the name of your group, city and state, anything else, especially what you might like to get out of today. So Carmit and I can focus on that. I am recording this webinar to just capture this information and make it available for our other group members who couldn't be on the call today. And I'm sorry there's such a small group. Sometimes that's just the way it goes. But it matters to you that show up. So we're going to jump right in. So if you'd like to introduce yourselves, go ahead.
We are Kate Ekman and Soya Thatch. We are volunteer coordinators for Beach Cities Health District. Megan Bixie is our director, and she's on your board. So here we are, just attending to find out what is going on in our roundtable today.
Great. Thank you very much. Anything you'd like to get out of today, or just to know what's going on?
We really didn't know what to expect. We were just interested in finding out, what Alive had to teach us or wanted us to know or participate in, since we've been hearing a lot about the organization through our director. And yeah, we don't have any specific needs or expectations.
Okay, no problem. So we'll move on to the next slide and talk a little bit about what strategic planning is all about. And this piece kind of fits in with any type of strategic planning you would like to do. And so again, this is an overview. You always want to have an introductory statement, talk about why you want to do it, who's involved. That's really important for posterity, because if you're looking at something 5 years from now and you're looking back, when did we do our last plan, who was involved? That's always really helpful. And then you'll want to have some type of background information, of course, about your organization, and as well as using that as a brief business statement or maybe an elevator pitch. It's important to include the information about the organizational structure, because that's really important, especially in any execution of your strategic plan. If you say, well, this committee is going to be in charge of doing these tasks, it's important that that committee is fully formed and functioning. Or maybe you need to create one in order to get that piece done. Example, if you are going to include in your strategic plan more marketing, well, who's going to do that? Is that the marketing team? Do you have one? Is it an ad hoc group? Would it be just the whole executive committee or whole board is going to be working on this as a group? And then a vision. And it's really what you want to achieve and become. And again, this could be really simple in terms of 2 years from now, we want to be known throughout the community as the place where people who manage volunteers or programs come for resources, networking, and information. Or it could be something a lot broader than that. But again, it just depends on what your organization is about, the size, the scope. You may be starting very small from scratch, or you may be really well established, more than 20 years and really want to look at things differently. Carmit, what would you like to add to that?
Well, I look at strategic planning as an opportunity to bring as many stakeholders together as possible to help create the future of the organization. So I think in general, rather than looking at it as something dry and, mandatory to look at it as a wonderful possibility to reinvent the organization, and invite in people who may not have had a voice in the past to come in and share what the vision is for the future. So that's what I wanted to add. I wanted to ask our participants, are either or both of you involved in Adovia or an association of volunteer administrators in agencies?
Yes,
Is there a, go ahead.
we are both members of Dovia in LA. And
Okay.
we are also, you know, potential future board members there. So like to be able to think about the bigger picture too.
Great, because a lot of Dovias don't take the time to do strategic planning, and I think it's great if you are looking in a leadership role in your Dovia to think about what strategic planning would do for the future of the organization. And that's a great thing that new board members can bring, is let's really go through this process and do it well.
Absolutely. Thank you, Carmeet. We'll move on to the next slide and talk a little bit about some of the things you might want to be looking at, values. And I remember one that we did in the Dovia was a value that we put in. It was that we all agreed to be responsive to one another. So if someone sent out an email to everybody, that everybody agreed to respond if asked, or if they couldn't, at least to say, I can't answer this right now, but I promise to get back to you. And it's all about, you know, guiding that culture of the organization. You should already have a mission statement, but it never hurts to look at that again. A good mission statement is timeless, and you may not need to tweak it very much, but many may have been created, you know, back, and this is so weird to say, you know, I think we can all remember at this point, back before the internet or cell phones, and how many things have changed, you know, before LinkedIn, before Twitter, before Facebook. And so there may be some things you really do need to look in or look at within that mission statement. A problem statement, of course, if there are certain issues. And again, a good example, I think, is coming back to that marketing strategy. And if you know, wanted to be able to increase membership or to be able to increase the amount of exposure that your organization has within that profession in your local area, you know, marketing is really key to that. But does that mission statement or action plan involve using social media? It may or may not. Just in terms of if we're looking at something that was set up more than 10 years ago, I mean, just the iPhone is 10 years old. So just so many things have changed. It's really mind-boggling. And if you're of a certain age, that, you know, there's a lot more that's changed after that as well. And then the SWOT SWOT analysis, and that is strengths, weaknesses, opportunity, and threats. And it's a grid that you set up, and it's just a brainstorming. You set up four sections, and it's brainstorming, you know, what are our strengths? What are our weaknesses? What are our opportunities? What are our threats? And that really helps you kind of see what you're looking at. And so, for example, some of those strengths may be, you know, we have an established membership. An opportunity might be, you know, we could easily double our membership. We know that there's a lot of people out there. Some weaknesses would be that people may come to 2 or 3 meetings, but then they don't stay after that. And a threat might be something that could be maybe the local United Way or volunteer center might like to start something in terms of services and supports for volunteer managers. That could also be a positive or an opportunity for sure, and there may be some overlap. Carmeet, what would you like to add?
Well, I would add, again, sort of aligned with what I said earlier, one of the things that is really available, for example, is really a good opportunity, is doing a SWOT analysis with key people who are important to your organization. So calling up some funders, some competitors, members of the organization, people you want to have involved in the organization, and ask them to tell from their perspective what they think the organization's strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats are. And I can tell you going through that process is incredibly valuable. Sometimes stakeholders won't come to an organized meeting, but if you ask them for a half-hour opportunity to talk through, with the questions being a SWOT analysis, it can be very, very productive for your organization. And then going up to values, I'd say at some point, I hope, Gretchen, you'll show MAVA's recent strategic plan, but it was a really important exercise for us to go through and establish core values for our organization. We've been around 15 years and we've never done that. So I can't emphasize enough how important it is to look through what our values are and then to post that so that stakeholders can see that. And the same with the mission statement. I think going over the mission statement at least every 3 years is really important to take a look at what might have changed in your mission, because it is a rapidly changing world. So yeah, those are a few things I just wanted to add to that.
Well, that's great. And yes, Carmit, I do have that to show in a few minutes for you to talk a little more about that process. And I will be sending a copy of the slides, a link to the recording, as well as that document for you to take a look at for both of you as a resource. And Carmit is absolutely fine if you would like to use that as a template in the future. Thank you very much for that, Carmit. So next to go on.
Absolutely.
You bet, talking about goals. And this is just another piece to that. A strategic plan might have long-term as well as short-term goals. And certainly the challenges, and I've always found this to be true, and I think Carmit, for MAVA, they do have paid staff, but for many local volunteer manager associations, they work strictly off of volunteers. So and there is turnover within the leadership, which is mostly a good thing. You want to have new people coming into leadership roles. But it's important that there is accountability and people are able to follow through with what they said they will do. And there should be some type of way to evaluate it. How do we know that we achieved what we wanted to do? And that there is a quick executive summary. So it's easy to put out in 1 to 2 paragraphs. And this is, again, great communication for your membership, for your partners, for competitors, and especially for potential members. So they have, just a quick grasp on what's happening. And I found a lot of this from Smartsheet. There's some free strategic planning templates there too. If the one that Carmit has provided isn't a good fit for you, there's a lot of great resources out there, of course. And Carmit, what would you like to add to this slide?
No, I think you pretty much covered it. I think an important piece of the evaluation is to make sure that the board has a regular time each year to look at the strategic plan and to evaluate whether we've done what we said we were going to do. The recommended amount is at least quarterly. So for one board meeting to have a designated time to go over the strategic plan each quarter is what's recommended. So yeah, I think a lot of organizations do the strategic plan and then shelve it. And that is not the best practice. Making sure that it is reviewed and that there's some sort of accounting for whether we've done what we said we were going to do.
Right. Thank you, Carmit. Oh, that posted link isn't routing correctly for us. Okay, I will take a look at that and make sure I get you the correct link. And let me write that down on my notes here. Make sure I don't forget. And I apologize for that, but I will fix that. Okay, next slide. When we're talking about that, what you're hoping to achieve, it is. You want to think about 2 to 4 outcomes. Again, if you had a full paid staff, you might want to look at that, more outcomes. But for usually a volunteer-based organization that has limited amount of time and resources to put on this, you really do want, I think it's best to just look at 2 to 4 outcomes to start. And those 2 might be develop a leadership structure that is efficient and works for the organization. And number 2, develop a plan to increase membership. And again, if all else fails, go back to your mission, and it's certainly okay to start with that first. Carmit, what would you like to add to that?
You're probably going to get to this, but we want to make sure that the goals are SMART goals, right? Let's see if we can remember what SMART stands for. Strategic, measurable. I really want to focus on measurable. So, saying something like a plan to increase membership by 10%, that's great. But then we want to list in the strategic plan, what are the steps we are going to take to get there? Number 1, form a membership committee. Make sure committee has at least X number of members. Number 2, discuss a plan for recruitment. Number 3, a plan for retention. What are member benefits that we're going to offer? So being very specific. Yes, the S is specific, not strategic. Specific and measurable kinds of goals, so that you can go back quarterly and check off, yep, we did that. We formed the committee. We made outreach phone calls. We developed materials. So very specific and measurable things that you can do to achieve a higher goal.
Thank you, Carmit. So I'm going to just talk a little bit about my experience, and then Carmit, I'll give you a lot of time to talk about your experience, and that's when I'll pull up that strategic goal sheet so we can look at that, and you can maybe just talk about that process and go through. So the times with NOVA, which is the Northwest Oregon Volunteer Administrators Association, they did strategic planning about every 3 to 5 years. This was started actually, golly, in 1985. So they've been around for over 30 years. Very well established. They've had anywhere from 150 to 200 members in the Portland area. At one time, they were the highest concentration of CVAs in the world because they had started out way back in the day. I think even in the late 90s, there were study groups and ways to help you earn your CVA. So they've been very well established, and that I think they've done a nice job on kind of keeping up with the times. For example, one of their strategic plans that they looked at about 5 years ago was, so our monthly meeting, people aren't coming anymore. It was a lunch meeting in the middle of the day, and they were having a hard time just getting a really consistent mass of people. Even with 150 to 200 members, only 10 or 15 people were showing up. So during part of that strategic planning, and they were able to work with their local hands-on network, and they had a very good relationship with them. They were able to contact one of their staff members who came in and agreed to be the facilitator for the strategic planning. And I think it's really helpful to have someone come in from an outside organization to lead that discussion, so there isn't any one person that would be guiding it, but that way everybody can be equally involved in terms of that strategic planning committee, members, board members, etc. But it's also critical that that person leading that discussion really understands what your group is. I think we've all had that experience where you tell someone a little bit about what your organization does. They come in, oh yeah, I get it, I understand. And then they talk about something totally different. They think, oh, these are all volunteers. Well, they are, but it's a little different context. So that is also key. But with that, NOVA looked at that, got the input, and part of their strategic plan was, number one, to really change the way they provide services and supports to members. So now, instead of doing a monthly meeting, they do once a quarter, they do a networking social happy hour. And Portland, Oregon is famous for its brews and beers, so they switch around to different pubs and beer places around the metro area, and those are always well attended. They do a informational breakfast once a quarter, and that is just a little more networking. It's a little more formal. And then once a quarter, they do a half-day educational workshop, and that process has been working very well. And in the past, there were times that Nova did some strategic planning because there were some issues just within the leadership team. And I think a lot of it just had to do with some generational conflict in it. But it was a good way to have everybody sit down and talk about that, and talking in terms of how things were changing. Part of this had to do with this one person wasn't always an early adopter of technology. I'll just put it that way. And they were frustrated because they were sometimes out of the communication loop that everybody else was able to use quickly and efficiently. So we were able to sit down and talk about some ground rules about the best way to make sure that person was always included. And it did help kind of clear the air and kind of head off some future conflict. But overall, I would say, the two tips from my experience was, number one, try to have someone come in from outside your organization. And then number two, definitely do look at it on a regular basis. And I know Carmeet is going to talk about that some more too. Let me escape out of this and pull up the form that our Carmeet used. Now, I got to find it. Hold on a second here while I do that. And Carmeet, if you want to start talking, I'll go on mute. Go ahead.
Yeah, sure. So MAVA's strategic plan was done through an open space process. So open space technology is a somewhat new form of gathering input and making decisions for groups anywhere from 4 to 4,000. And it is very, very beneficial in strategic planning processes because it invites people to come together, sit in a circle, and create an agenda about what the vision is for the future of the organization. So MAVA's strategic plan that was done earlier was not very easy to digest or understand for a lot of people. So what MAVA did was invite all members, funders, community members, nonprofits and government entities throughout Minnesota to come together in the evening, have some pizza, have some fun, and discuss everybody's vision for the future of the organization / the future of volunteer engagement leadership in the state of Minnesota. About 45 people came, which is a good number, primarily from the Twin Cities. And the question asked was, what is your vision for the future of MAVA and volunteer engagement leadership in Minnesota? And people were invited to come up with different topics that they thought needed to be discussed relevant to that question. And each person who had such a topic was given an opportunity to lead a small group discussion about that issue, to write some notes and to post it up so that others could see. And what happened during a 3-hour period is there were about 10 different discussions happening simultaneously and also one after the other. And so there was a richness of information that was provided to MAVA about the vision for the future. And each of those 10 groups had a note taker and a person who reported back to the group about the findings. So some of the topics were, how do we engage educational professionals more in volunteer engagement leadership? Another one was, should the healthcare volunteer group be a part of MAVA, or should it be an independent group? Another one was, how do we engage students more as volunteers? Another one was, how do we create financial sustainability for this organization? So lots of people had different agendas and different things they wanted to accomplish. And then at the end, we did some voting around where is the most energy for MAVA to focus on in the next 3 years. And based on that, we came up with the strategic plan. So in addition to that, we did the one-on-one interviews that I talked about earlier with people who did not come to the open space. And we invited anybody who wanted to be interviewed and to give input into MAVA's future after we kind of put together everything that happened at the open space. So I just want to stop there for a minute and see if anybody has questions about open space. Is this something that you're familiar with, you've heard of before? Any questions that you have about that? Okay, hearing nothing, I will, thanks, Gretchen. You're actually at the point on MAVA's strategic plan on the screen here, where we came up with these eight growth areas that MAVA wanted to focus on based on the open space and the interviews that we did. As well as we did have a strategic planning committee that spent a lot of time looking at all of the data and the input we were getting. So staff and volunteer development, huge piece. I mean, MAVA is fortunate to have 6 staff and a VISTA leader. So, we are a small and growing nonprofit and really need to focus on not only staff development, but volunteer growth and development. And we are a service enterprise organization, so constantly making sure that we are using best practices in volunteer management. Number 2, and this was probably the number 1 thing that we focused on in the open space, was member engagement, increasing member benefits, support, and increasing recruitment and retention and re-energizing our members. We are a membership organization that is of utmost importance. So that really rung loud and clear. The other was we have a lot of services, trainings, making sure that we're measuring outcomes and that we have high levels of participant satisfaction. We are an advocacy organization, so making sure that we are advocating not only in Minnesota, but nationwide for elevating the status of the profession and creating a culture of volunteering everywhere. And we do some legislative work in Minnesota, so that was important. Another area that came up that MAVA has not focused enough on, and we are now, is diversity and inclusion. And we do have a diversity and inclusion initiative where we are trying to not only ourselves represent our communities effectively, but help the organizations who are MAVA members to increase volunteerism in underrepresented communities. So that's a big piece. Visibility and communication, so that's always going to be a big piece. And then making sure that our revenue stays consistent. And we picked an amount that we wanted to, was a healthy amount to run this nonprofit, and make sure that that's an amount that we keep and that we have steps to getting that amount of money. And then making sure that our infrastructure infrastructure works, our technology, our office facilities, our training facilities. So those were the key areas that we focused on. Gretchen, if you can go back to the very top, I'll talk a little bit about the values and how we came up with that, and that we did also look at our mission statement again, and we created a vision statement. And this is something that the Strategic Planning Committee did once we had all of the data. So are you able to scroll up to the very top?
I am at the top of that page. Is that what you're looking for, or are you looking for?
Oh, I'm sorry. I mean the top of the very document. Yeah, the very first page. There we go. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, so we did rewrite our mission statement. The old mission statement was long and clunky, and so we were really happy to come up with one sentence that really captures all that MAVA does. MAVA connects, educates, strengthens, and advocates for volunteer engagement leadership and their volunteer engagement leaders and their organizations to positively impact communities. So that felt like a good, tight statement for who we are. We used to have a tagline. We decided to eliminate that. And then we came up with an aspirational vision statement, which is MAVA is the premier statewide organization uniting, educating, and advancing Minnesota communities through excellence in leadership of volunteers and best practices in organizational volunteerism. So that was an important statement for us to come into. Again, where do we want to go? What's our vision for the future? And then if you can scroll down to the values, this was something brand new for us. What do we value as an organization? And a lot of discussion happened, and then we had somebody who wordsmithed a little bit to come up with these values. So if you scroll down, we will get to the values. There we go. Scroll a little more so we can see them all.
Carmita, is this the part you're looking for here in the values? I'm just going through the detail on the 8 items.
Yes, I just want you to keep scrolling down so we can see all the values on the screen.
Okay. And we did have a question that they would love to know a little bit more about number 5, the diversity. She would like to know how you're working on that right now. And I'll scroll all the way down, and then I'll come back up to that piece, and then you can address that specifically.
Okay, yeah, if you scroll down to core values, that does cover some of that. So obviously the first core value is that we value volunteerism, that volunteers make our communities better. So that it was clearly, something that we felt had to be in the core values. So we jump to down there. Can we go back to that first page so I can go through all of the core values on the very first page of the document? And then I'll get to diversity and inclusion in just a moment. So back to that very first page. So I have them in front of me while Gretchen's working on getting back to the rest of the core values. The first one was volunteerism. The second one was education. So making sure that trained volunteer leaders are well educated and that we recognize that they are essential to maximizing organizational success. So the second core value is education. The third was connection. Sharing and networking builds our profession. So there we go. That's up there now. Great, thank you. Inclusion. So once we identified that inclusion is a core value of ours, it was really, really clear that we had to develop strategies to look at inclusion. So how we're working on diversity and inclusion is, number one, we received a grant to work with city, county, and state government on being more inclusive in their volunteerism efforts of immigrants and communities of color. So how do they help their immigrants and communities of color feel more included in their communities and in the volunteerism that's necessary in their communities? So we've been doing some work, particularly in the East Metro area with various cities and counties to help them reach out in a more effective way to immigrant and communities of color. And we are putting together a training, which we're doing in November, on inclusive civic engagement. So that's one initiative that we are doing, which has been very successful. We have a task force of leaders from many diverse communities coming together to talk about how we can, in general, be more inclusive in civic volunteerism, city and county work. That has now branched out to how can we help nonprofits in general be more inclusive in volunteerism, recruit more from local communities of color and immigrant communities, recruit more from the communities whose members may be recipients of services provided by that organization. So we have been doing a lot of studying on how to do that, a lot of teaching and consulting. Some of the funding we got, we are able to give out mini grants to organizations and cities to help them improve their work. And we also are making them members of MAVA for free. So that's some of the program work we're doing in that area. We also are very mindful of who's on our board and who's on our staff, and are we inclusive enough? And diversity and inclusion goes beyond demographics in terms of race and gender, ethnicity, age. We're also looking at, we've always been a board that's very much about volunteer coordinators. All of our board members have always been volunteer coordinators, volunteer engagement leaders. And we felt it was time for MAVA's board to have some other skills and talents on the board as well. So we now have some financial people, some corporate people, some marketing people, and that was a very important move for us. And those viewpoints and backgrounds are essential to our future. So those are some of the efforts that we are doing in terms of diversity and inclusion, and it will certainly continue. And if you take a look at MAVA's full strategic plan, which is 9 pages long, so I'm not going to go over it now, you'll see some very specific and measurable activities that we're putting into place around diversity and inclusion. You know, starting with making diversity a top priority for hiring and volunteer and board recruitment decisions, building relationships with organizations that serve diverse communities, conducting one-on-one volunteer training at culturally specific organizations, expanding our outreach and programming for culturally specific organizations, and ultimately creating a diversity and inclusion task force. So those are some of the things we're doing in that area. So, you know, I'm happy to share and have you look at and adopt the template that MAVA used for its strategic plan. It has proven to be a useful tool in that people understand it. It's pretty clear, it's pretty specific and measurable. And we've now committed to once a quarter pulling this out and, you know, putting check boxes. Yep, did that, didn't do that. And trying to make sure by the end of this plan, which is 2019, we have checked everything off. So Yeah, so thanks. I see that you've got some comments there, and if you've got any specific questions, I'm happy to stop talking for a minute and see if there's something in particular that I can answer for you.
Yeah, if you
Gretchen wrote, checking off the boxes is so satisfying.
and
it says, okay, yeah, you guys are good.
okay, wonderful. Thank you. This is great, Carmit. And I will include this as well as some more information within the slide deck about the things that we discussed, service enterprise, the open space technology, and I'll make sure that I correct that link. Let me come back to the presentation as we wrap up. I want to pay attention to the time. We've got about 15 minutes, so timing is doing very well here. So again, think about what's going to work best in your community, whether it's a group discussion, that facilitation, open space format, and if you include that SWOT analysis and just visioning the success. And another type of starting a strategic plan that I was involved in when I worked with, for AARP as the coordinator volunteers for the state of Oregon was that we just did this visioning and we just sat around and had a big piece of poster board and you set the scene. We're at a party. It's a year from now and we're celebrating. What are we celebrating? And so people would just brainstorm what we're celebrating, and from that we could condense that down into, here's some clear goals to work toward. So there's a lot of different great ways to use these different styles. These are just some ideas that you could use in the future if you'd like to do that. And again, who can help? Like Carmit talked about, it's really important to bring people in from outside that the usual circle. So do look at the kind of resources within where you work at your agency, or within, if there's a parent agency for your local DOVIA, great. Don't be afraid to connect with past leadership. They may be really willing and interested in helping. Is there another local group similar to yours that might like to help? Maybe there's some reciprocation you could do down the line. For example, the local SHRM, Society of Human Resources Management, or the local PRSA, which is the Public Relations Society of America. Those are two similar groups which you might be able to reach out in your area that could be a good resource for that. Is there a similar association? And are there other just community resources? It's amazing what local communities have within the United Way, the Hands-On Network, community action, even through government organizations. And it's possible that your local state AARP office, they do have trained volunteers who do facilitation within their networks. And if you can make the case, they may be willing and able to come and help with your group, especially in terms of how our profession impacts so many community nonprofits and volunteerism in general. I think it's, we can really make the case that, we're worth that time and investment for someone to come and provide those resources for us. Carmit, would you like to add anything to this slide?
Only to just mention that Alive is a resource, and we are certainly happy at Alive to help DOVIAs do strategic planning and find the resource that is appropriate for you. So that's an important function for Alive. So I just wanted to add that.
Thank you. And I'll add that to the bullet point. You're right. We should. And again, so I'm going to include that strategic plan that Carmit and her team came up with, which I think it's great because it number one, I mean, you can get a lot of things off the internet, but this is so specific to what it is we all do that you don't have to mess with it. I mean, it's there, and it's a great example of what it could look like. So we had a little bit of time for questions a few minutes ago. I just want to throw that out there again. If there's anything else you do think of, please don't hesitate to contact myself or Carmeet, and I will include our contact information within the slide deck too. I think mine is in there. Carmeet, I think I put yours in, but if I didn't, I will add it. But wait, I have a few announcements. So first of all, our next Dovia networking webinar is November 15th, and that will be about building community partners. So the registration is already up for that on our calendar, and if you'd like to attend, I would welcome you to do that. And then next, of course, we have our Take the Leap, October 24th and 25th, and I've heard a rumor that there may be one in Dovia LA's future. I don't know if Megan has announced that yet, but I think that's happening. We're very excited. We've got I think we have 38 remote sites in the US and Canada, and we have the potential to have, over 1,000 attendees. And the theme is all about take the leap and embrace change. And if this year hasn't been one of change, you may have been under a rock somewhere. Time to get out and see what's going on. But we're very excited about the synergy between the presenters and the concept. It's going to be very, very exciting. We are also recruiting right now for board members for the class of 2018 that will serve a 3-year term. If you're an Alive member, you should be getting our newsletter within the next few weeks. We'll have more information about that, or you can go to our website and fill out the form if that's something you're interested in, board members. And that our annual meeting will be November 29th at 1 p.m. Eastern. We will be recording the session, so if you're not able to attend, you'll be able to get a message about how to access that recording so you can hear more about that. Carmeet, do you have any announcements?
No, it looks like you have covered it all.
Thank you. All right. And I did not add your information, Carmeet, but I will. And if you do want more information, clarification, please don't hesitate to connect with us. That's absolutely why we're here. And hopefully by the end of today, I will be sending along the slide deck, the link to the recording, and those supporting documents that we've talked about. And if there's any other questions or discussion, this is a great time for it here. I regret that there aren't more people on the call, but sometimes that's the way it goes. And because we have it recorded, hopefully more folks can access it and they'll look, I'm going to come to the next one. So with that, if there aren't any other questions, comments, I'll let everybody go and say have a wonderful day.
Thank you, everyone.
You're welcome. Thank you for your time.
Right.
Yeah, thanks for being here today.
Kristen.
And Carmeet, thank you very much for all of your expertise. It was great to have you on the call today.
All right. Thanks for having the call.
You bet. We'll talk soon.
And okay, sounds great. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
I feel bad.